If Disney ever looked for a real-life Mulan, they should have started in a small mountain village in Serbia. There, in 1892, a girl named Milunka Savic was born into a world that expected her to carry water, not a rifle. By the time she was done, she had charged machine guns, taken prisoners with a bayonet, survived 9 wounds, and become the most decorated female soldier in history. Her commanders called her a hero. The enemy called her a devil. And for a long time, her own country tried not to call her anything at all. In 1912, the Balkans were a fuse waiting to be lit. Serbia was preparing to fight the Ottoman Empire, and the army began calling up young men from villages like Milunka's. One of those letters had her brother's name on it. He was frail, and the thought of him in uniform terrified her. So she did something unthinkable. She cut off her hair, stole his place, and reported for duty dressed as a man. They wrote down Milan Savic instead of Milunka and didn't look too closely. The Serbian army was desperate for bodies, but what it got in Milunka was a force of nature. She saw her first action in the First Balkan War, fighting the Ottomans in brutal mountain campaigns. The conditions were savage snow, mud, hunger, lice, and artillery that reduced villages to splinters. But in the chaos of trenches and bayonet charges, no one cared that the small, sharp-eyed private didn't shave. She fought again in the Second Balkan War, this time against Bulgaria, and that's when her secret exploded along with an enemy shell. Shrapnel tore into her, and surgeons preparing to operate on Milan discovered Milunka instead. Dragged before her commanding officer, she stood at attention, bandages stained red, waiting to be thrown out. The colonel told her she'd done more than enough, and could transfer to the nursing corps, a respectable place for a woman. Milunka, just 20 years old and covered in battlefield grime, stared him in the eye and said she'd rather stay in the infantry. The colonel, according to later accounts, laughed, then went quiet, and finally said, "Very well, soldier. Back to your unit." From that day on, the Serbian army made no more fuss about her gender. Then came 1914 and a war so large that even the blood of the Balkans would be swallowed by it. Austria-Hungary invaded Serbia, expecting a quick victory. What they got instead were battles like Sir and Kolubara, where badly equipped Serbian troops, Milunka among them, hurled the invaders back across the rivers. In one assault, she reportedly rushed ahead of her unit, lobbed grenades into an enemy trench, and emerged with 23 Austrian prisoners, all taken at bayonet point. For that, she received the Karađorđe Star with swords, Serbia's highest award for bravery. She would earn it 3 times. The war did not spare her. She was wounded again and again, shrapnel, bullets, concussion, refusing evacuation whenever she could still stand. When Serbia was finally overwhelmed and its army forced into the tragic winter retreat across Albania, Milunka marched with the men, crossing frozen mountains under attack from all sides. On the Salonika front, re-equipped and reorganized, she went back into the trenches, now fighting alongside French and British troops. There, she earned the French Croix de Guerre Weiss and the Legion of Honor, as well as Russia's Cross of St. George. By the end of the war, her uniform clinked when she walked. But here's the unbearable contrast. On the battlefield, generals saluted her courage. In peace, bureaucrats mostly ignored her. After the war, she returned to Belgrade expecting a decent job. Instead, she wound up working as a postal clerk, then as a cleaner in a state bank, raising several adopted children in a small house without running water. Visitors who interviewed her decades later found her medals in boxes, not on walls, and the woman more interested in whether they'd eaten than in talking about her past. When World War II broke out, her life was upended again. The Germans occupied Yugoslavia, and Milunka, fiercely patriotic, refused to cooperate. She was arrested by the Gestapo and spent months in a concentration camp. Unlike many, she survived, later saying that perhaps her medals made her too famous to quietly disappear. After the war, the new communist authorities were wary of heroes from the old Serbian army. Recognition came slowly, never matching the scale of her deeds. Look at her medal count, and the story is undeniable. 3 Karađorđe Stars, 2 French Croix de Guerre, the French Legion of Honor, Russia's Cross of St. George, the British Medal of the Order of St. Michael. Only a handful of men in World War I matched that collection of decorations. For a woman, in an era that said she shouldn't even be on the front line, it is simply unmatched. People who met her late in life struggled to connect the legend with the small, solid woman in front of them. When asked how she found the courage to charge machine guns, she supposedly replied, You don't think, you run. When a reporter called her the Serbian Joan of Arc, she laughed and said she knew nothing about saints, only about her comrades. We call her a real-life Mulan for how her story began, but Milanka Savic's true legacy is entirely her own. Thanks for watching, and if you want to see more stories of forgotten heroes, be sure to subscribe.